Epidemiological research methods, cross-sectional studies. Cross-sectional studies are a widely used study design method in epidemiology. They are quantitative and observational in nature and are often simply called surveys. By the end of this session, you should be able to describe the key characteristics of the cross-sectional study design and describe the measures of disease occurrence that cross-sectional studies estimate. In 2010, the World Health Organization published a report estimating that there were 285 million visually impaired people in the world. Where does this estimate come from? Well, it's based on prevalence figures calculated from cross-sectional studies. In cross-sectional studies, we analyse data which has been collected at one specific point in time. It's not usually possible to examine everyone, so we collect a representative sample and extrapolate the information to the rest of the population. For logistical and cost reasons, it is almost always impossible to survey everyone in a population. Therefore, the people to be included in the survey have to be representative of the whole population. A technique called sampling is used. Even though the whole population is not sampled, the sample size still has to be large enough to estimate the prevalence of the condition of interest with adequate precision. Right, cross-sectional studies are used to measure some characteristics of a population or group at one point in time. So they are observational and descriptive, but they cannot be used to attribute causality. For example, you may want to look at various characteristics of a population such as age, gender, genetic factors, and some diseases. Blindness, trachoma, and maybe a condition such as myopia. Then you can see if some characteristics are associated strongly or weakly or not at all with the disease outcomes. Cross-sectional study results can help us to infer or suggest cause and effect between a risk factor and a disease. However, because disease and risk factors are measured at the same time, we do not know which occurred first. We can never use cross-sectional studies to prove that exposure to a risk factor has caused a disease. For example, a cross-sectional study can tell us if there is a relationship, known as an association, between poverty and blindness, but it cannot tell us if blindness causes poverty or if being poor is a cause of blindness. In eye disease, two types of cross-sectional study are widely used: population-based studies and rapid assessment surveys. How would we carry out a population study to know the burden and main causes of blindness, for example in Burkina Faso? To do this, we would examine everyone for all the known blinding eye diseases in a representative sample using the same method. This is known as a protocol. By using a protocol, we standardize data collection and can obtain an estimate of the prevalence of the disease. For eye care, there is now an alternative method to the traditional population survey. The Rapid Assessment of Avoidable Blindness, or RAB technique, only samples people in the population aged 50 years and above, and examines only for the main causes of blindness. This is an acceptable technique because comprehensive population surveys have previously found that more than 75% of blindness is avoidable, and more than 80% of avoidable blindness is found in people aged 50 and over. The RAB method is used in eye care because there is a lack of data needed for planning eye care services. Traditional surveys are difficult and expensive. Each type of epidemiological study design has its strengths and weaknesses. In cross-sectional studies, we gather data on the prevalence of and exposure to a number of diseases and population characteristics. These are gathered at one time or over a short period. The main strengths of cross-sectional studies are: they are usually quick and relatively cheap to do. They can be used to measure associations amongst multiple variables. They are useful for generating hypotheses. Information collected can be used to compare regions and also subgroups such as ethnicity, age, and gender. When repeated over time, they can be used to assess the impact of an intervention on a population. The main weaknesses of cross-sectional studies are: the people who participate in the survey might be different from those who refuse to take part. This can lead to biased results. Because they are carried out at one time, they are not suitable for studying conditions with a short duration or rare diseases. The relationships between a disease or condition, population characteristics, and disease exposure cannot be established over time. This is known as temporality. Temporality is needed to establish cause and effect. In summary, a cross-sectional study provides an estimate of the prevalence of a disease or condition in a given population. This study design involves examining everyone in the selected representative population sample. As the disease or condition is measured at one point in time, causality cannot be proven, but a hypothesis can be generated. In eye care, rapid assessment methods are also used to determine and map the magnitude and distribution of blindness.